Spin with Lydia Lunch. Tim Dahl is in absentia right now. Tonight we're featuring the Art Gray Noizz Quintet, or at least two of them. That would be Ryan Skeleton Boy, a local New York stronghold for many years, the master of the two-string bass, and Stu Spasm, also known as Art Gray, from Lubricated Goat and other projects, which we'll be discussing. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello. How's it going, Lydia?
Oh, it's perfect, of course, as always. So, Stu, you have quite a checkered history, starting all the way back in Adelaide, when did you first pick up the guitar, by the way?
I started playing when I was about 14 or so. But I started on the bass because my father was a bass player.
Was he in a jazz band?
Yeah. He used to play with various quite known jazz players that came to Adelaide.
Like who?
Like Herbie Mann and Art Pepper.
So music was in your blood, but you wanted to revolt against that kind of music, I guess.
Yeah, well, he was really tough on me as far as music went.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, he would say, what are you going to do when you leave school? Are you going to work in a factory? I'd say, no. He'd say, are you going to work outside? No. Are you working in an office? No. He'd say, well, what are you going to do then? I'd say, I'm going to be a rock star. And then he'd go around again, say the same question. And by the third time, I'd get whack. He'd sit where you're sitting, and I'd sit here, basically. So
I always feel like giving you a good whack, but I don't mean across the head. I mean, but you knew from the age of what? 12, 14?
As soon as I started playing, yeah.
Yeah, that you were going to be an unemployed musician for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Are you a rock star?
No, not... well, I mean, I don't have any money, so... I wish I'd written some hits in the 80s.
Well, yes, my father once said to me, knowing nothing as he did, it only takes one hit single. I'm like, I'm going to hit you in a minute. I think that the Art Gray Noizz Quintet, besides Retrovirus, of course, the best band in New York.
Well, thank you.
I really do, which is why we are collaborating on some future projects. It's raunchy, it's sexy, and it's something that music seems to have lost. It's fucking rock and roll.
Well, I'd describe ourselves as a villain band. Like, there's all these goody-goody bands, you know.
I don't, because I don't listen to goody-goody music. The Art Gray
You're a
Noizz,
villain, so...
Villainess.
Yeah.
Art Gray Noizz reckons back to me to bands that we loved in the 80s, like Jesus Lizard, or that period of where things were really kind of threatening and sexy. I mean, sex has been leaked out of rock music. I don't even know if rock music exists at this point, except for two characters sitting beside me.
We need to get some young folks into it.
I don't give a shit who comes to it, but let's go back to the beginning. So you're in Adelaide, Dad's whacking you upside the head. He's playing with Art Pepper, who the fuck cares? And that was, what year was that you picked up the bass?
I started playing the bass when I was about 12 or 13. And I had a band at school where we had a guitar player, bass, drums, and piano.
What were they called?
Biceps Incorporated at one point.
Did anybody have them then?
No, probably not. Not even pubes. But
that's always a bonus to have no pubes. That way we wouldn't have to tweeze them off of you.
But the guitar player in the band was kind of a delinquent, and him and the drummer got caught stealing milk money off people's doorsteps.
Nice.
So then the guitar player wasn't allowed to come to the drummer's house to practice anymore, and we didn't have a guitar player. And we didn't really need a piano player, so I switched from bass to guitar.
Which made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So what music was going on at that period? So you're 14. What year is this?
That would have been like the early 70s.
The early 70s. All right. So were you into glam?
Yeah, I won a transistor radio in the Boy Scouts when I was 11. And at that point, T-Rex and David Bowie and Slade and all that good shit.
I mean, when rock was really good and also transgressive and weird.
Yeah.
Loved T-Rex, loved Bowie, loved The Sweet. Even like Slade, I must admit. Mott the Hoople.
Yeah, and then later at night they would play the more adult stuff like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple.
Did you like Led Zeppelin when you were young?
I did When I was punk rock, I used to deny that I ever liked them.
Well, you go through periods because I think Led Zeppelin, they're easy to hate, but then you go back and hear some of the songs and they're really fucking beautiful and masterful. I mean, they just are.
Yeah.
It's like you rebel to get your own style, but I mean, face it, I hate most fucking music, so what does that matter? So your first band, did you even have a sound? Did you try to be like T-Rex? Did you try to be glam?
The band I had at school, no, we didn't really.
Because you didn't know really what you're doing. You're 14.
Yeah. Then I joined a band where I was 16 and everybody else in the band was 18, and everyone in the band was called John except for me.
Ooh, the Johnnies. Should have been. What kind of music was that?
We used to do like Bad Company.
Oh, really awful.
And Led Zeppelin and Superstition, the Jeff Beck style Superstition.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, at 16, were you able to play Jimmy Page?
Yeah, I got really good within a year. And people always were remarked on how good I was for my age.
I'm remarking on how good you are for your age at this point, so you're pretty damn good for your whatever that age is.
But then punk rock came out not long afterwards, and I renounced all this stuff and denied I had ever been into it.
All right, so
really
what punk rock drew you to it? Who specifically?
Probably when the Sex Pistols were first on TV.
Oh, such a typical teenage boy.
And ironically, the store around the corner had like the Stranglers and the Damned and stuff like that.
Well, the Stranglers were weird because they were considered punk, but really their music
wasn't hip to like them.
They were dark pop.
And one of them had a mustache.
I mean, Golden Brown, a song about heroin, but a beautiful song. But and they were called the Stranglers.
Yeah.
So punk rock came around. Then what? Now how old are you? 18?
16.
16? So you drop your Led Zeppelin trousers.
Yeah.
And you put on your punk rock.
I tried to take all the blues out of my playing and stuff.
Which you've now come back around to because, as we know, I mean, blues is the basis of most rock, so.
Yeah. But, elements of it, but not like noodly guitar solos and stuff.
Don't need no noodles. So you're in Adelaide. Then what? Adelaide, the middle of nowhere.
We lived in Adelaide.
First of all, Australia is the middle of nowhere, and then Adelaide is the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and then we lived in the suburbs.
So the middle of the middle
country.
of the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So I was jealous of anyone that lived in a city. I used to have to hitchhike for miles into the city to see bands.
Who would you go see?
I wanted to go and see Radio Birdman, but my parents refused to let me hitchhike down there. And that was like
Cunts.
a seminal gig that they
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
Because this school friend said his brother was going to drive down, and then an hour later he said he wasn't going to. And so I was going to hitchhike down, and then they didn't let me. And then a week later, I just started hitchhiking to see stuff.
Whether they liked it or not.
Yeah.
That's right. Stick
And
your
that was
thumb
when
out.
I went to see The Boys Next Door.
The Boys Next Door, which is what the birthday party and hence Nick Cave came out of.
Yeah, and there was only about like 20 people there.
Of course. I'm surprised there was that many. So what stuck out to you about the birthday party? Roland S. Howard, perhaps?
No, he wasn't even in it the first time they came.
Shit, well, they must have really sucked.
They had musical notes on tires, and they were a bit kind of power pop looking.
Wow.
And then the next time they came over, Roland was in it.
Changes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then they got kind of foppish. They were doing that song, Scatterbrain. You know that song?
No, I don't. But Roland S. Howard, to me, is just absolutely one of the best guitar players that ever lived, and a fantastic songwriter, an amazing human being. Died too early. He is the one who defined the sound of the birthday party, which is where Nick Cave was last great. So anyway, the Boys Next Door come with Roland S. Howard. Did that give you like a new verb for the guitar? I mean, that really was... I mean, even early on, Roland Howard was pretty groundbreaking because
he's great.
He understood, unlike most guitar players or musicians, the dynamics of space, of minimalism. Unless you're talking the blues, guitar is not usually a minimalist instrument. People always want to play too much.
Yeah, well, Mick Harvey kind of took a backseat to Roland in a lot of ways. I mean, each time I saw him, I might have seen him like 2 times in each transition until they went away and suddenly came back as the birthday party.
And everything changed.
Yeah, and he just had like the leather pants and hell written on his chest and no shirt. And, Tracy was a cowboy. And
So birthday party were pretty impactful. I mean, I was living in Los Angeles when I first heard the birthday party. I was ready to get out of there, and I ran to New York, and they were playing, and there were 20 people there for the first birthday party show, and Roland Howard and I immediately just hooked in. I never from the first moment I met him, ever agreed with one thing Nick Cave said. He did not get me at all. Roland Howard and I hooked in immediately, but then again, that tells you really the difference between what each brought. I think the Birthday Party were one of the best bands ever on the face of the planet. I love the lyrics, I love the music, I love Tracy Pugh, the bass player, Cowboy, all of it. But that was a short-lived thing, as most things are. In a sense, Birthday Party, Jesus Lizard, Butthole Surfers, Art Gray Noizz. These are iconic bands that represent a sound of danger, sleazy, villainous, raunchy rock and roll. There's not much of it left. And here we are with you, so tell me all about it. You're in Adelaide, now what?
I had a band in Adelaide, and there was this girl that lived there who became Tracy Pugh's girlfriend. And,
Kate?
Yeah, and she was managing the band I had in Adelaide.
Okay.
That was called the Bad Poets. And there was this girl called Jade that sang in the band, and she used to do a duet of Jackson with Nick Cave and stuff like that.
That must have been abysmal.
Yeah, I wasn't actually there that night, but anyway, a bunch of my friends moved to Melbourne, and I moved.
And what
not
year was
long
this?
after. That was like 81.
The thing is, Australia, it is the middle of nowhere, but great music has come out of Australia. Great musicians have come out of Australia, from The Scientist to the Beast of Bourbon, Birthday Party, J.G. Thirlwell, yourselves. There's a period in time when things are fertile. Everybody's impacted by it, and there you go. So you moved to Melbourne, 81.
Yeah. Well, at that time, Melbourne and Sydney was the only places to be from.
Of course.
But everybody aspired to go to London primarily. Australia had a general kind of insecurity.
And
lack of
I still feel that
self-confidence.
Australia is cool. I still feel there's great musicians there. There's great clubs and there's great audience. I love going to Australia in spite of the 16-hour journey from Los Angeles, but I still think it's an amazingly fertile place. And being that far away kind of inspires that.
No, it is good to be from there. Obviously, all the influence was a combination of American
And London,
British.
American, and then...
And the way they were assimilated was
Who were
was good.
some of your favorite bands at that period or around that time?
When we're talking about 81 or whatever, I was into a lot of British post-punk type stuff.
Like who?
Like the first Public Image albums.
Absolutely
and the
great.
early Susie and the Banshees albums and Magazine and the pop
Love
group.
Magazine. By the way, Magazine, we are covering, that would be I, Lydia Lange, and the Art Gray Noizz Quintet have covered Permafrost.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, it was your suggestion, and I mean, how could I disagree with I Will Drug You and Fuck You on the Permafrost?
Exactly. The only thing I didn't know was what a permafrost actually was. I thought it was some kind of mattress.
The only thing I didn't know was that the first line is so weird, like thunder shook on the outhouse again.
Yeah, I know,
mean,
like,
well, Howard Devoto...
It's all rainy outside, and he's inside fucking her on this nice mattress.
Howard Devoto, who became a librarian, Magazine were amazing. It also sprouted Barry Adamson, which was great. So Joy Division, were you into them or not?
Yeah.
Mainly British...
And Barry Adamson used to
post-punk.
come over to Melbourne fairly frequently, even before he did the
Really
bands he
talented
became.
Barry Adamson, the bass player of Magazine, and then went on to create great albums like The Moss Side Story. A great musician, paranoid schizophrenic, whatever, that's his problem, not mine. He lived in a bedsit 1 block away from me when I moved to London to chase Roland S. Howard after meeting Birthday Party in New York. I'm like, Roland and I immediately professed we're going to work together. I ran off to London. Birthday Party went on tour. I'm left there with no one. But Barry Adamson lived 1 block away in a bedsit, and Roland lived not that far away. And anybody who doesn't know what a bedsit is, it is the most brutal and horrible of living conditions that London has to offer. It's one tiny room.
I lived in one when I went to
Of course you
London.
did.
And
It's
James
like
Johnson lived upstairs.
And James Johnson, a big sexy noise, lived upstairs. It's like a prison cell. And this is what London offers musicians.
And there was 1 bathroom between 17 units.
And there you go. That's
And
the
no
life
shower.
of rock and roll. So, all right, you go to Melbourne.
Yeah. So I went to Melbourne and I started putting a band together there. Ultimately, I wrote a lot of songs that ended up in Lubricated Goat at that
And
time.
Lubricated Goat was a pretty notorious outfit. I mean, it penetrated the States.
Yeah, but this is a good few years before that.
Of course, you had to go somewhere. Now we're only talking, now you're in your 20s.
Yeah. So I had a band. It was called A Singing Dog.
Terrible name. No wonder you went nowhere. Singing
Well, they
dog.
would always have like talk shows, and they would bring on a singing dog. And the thing that always happened was the dog wouldn't sing on the show, and everybody was always really let down.
Were you the dog that sang?
The dog that wouldn't sing that let everybody down. So it was probably quite a self-defeating name, perhaps.
Do you consider yourself a bit of a dog there, Stuart?
I guess so, yeah.
Well, I have to tell one great rock and roll story. I just have to interject here because, I mean, I always love to try to instigate rock and rollers about their most horrific. We were at a sound check. I was appearing as a guest with the Art Gray Noizz a couple of weeks ago, and I asked Stuart for some strange reason during the sound check, Stu, have you ever shat on stage? And I loved the answer so much. He's like, and mind you, I'm below the stage and he's on top of the stage. And with some consternation, he goes, well, not shat on the stage, but I do remember once coming up to a club and I really had to take a shit. And I go into the bathroom and the toilet is just almost overflowing with fecal waste. So he decides to squat because he's got you, as we do on tour. Sometimes you just got to let it go. Decides to just squat and take a shit. And suddenly realizes, and he does scream while telling me the story, oh my God, his cock is actually in the fecal water. And he runs over to the sink and, of course, tries to splash the horrible remnants off. I love the story so much, but I had to admit that it's another reason why we may never have sex. I'm just sorry. But you'd have to wear a hazmat
I know,
suit.
I'm still not sure it's clean.
But I'm sure it isn't, but I did love that story. Let's get to Lubricated Goat, because that's kind of what you're noted and notorious for. I mean, first of all, the name is pretty offensive. Like Jesus Lizard Butthole Surfers, Lubricated Goat. Makes sense. It's like a barnyard parade.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine made it up, and
Probably acted it out as
we used
well.
to just come up with the most ridiculous names we could think
Well, the
of.
singing dog was not too intelligent, but, I mean, Lubricated Goat is about as good as it gets. So what was the thematic of the Lubricated Goat? Who was in it? What did it do? Why did you do it? When did you do it? You're in Melbourne.
I did that band when I was in Sydney.
Okay.
It was a few years.
Aren't you
had
glad you're not
elapsed.
there now? Biggest
Apparently,
heat wave.
yeah.
Horrible.
I could do with some nice weather. But
Yeah, but that's not nice. That is a fucking toxic heat wave.
Yeah.
It's like 111 degrees the other day. Anyway, what was the general vibe of Lubricated Goat?
It was kind of ugly. This is at the point where I should have written a hit that would have carried me through into my old age. But unfortunately, I played ugly, dissonant music.
Well, what's weird is that to me, every song on the new coming soon Art Gray album sounds like a hit, but I don't know in what universe. I mean, the songs are so catchy and so good and ridiculous and sleazy and sexy at the same time, but I don't know where this would be a hit.
Yeah.
Except for on, my favorite jukebox. That's what's weird. I mean, I think you are writing really catchy, clever, hot, great rock songs, but where's it supposed to go now? Like, where has it ever gone?
Public opinion hasn't really swayed in my favor as the years went by.
Well, I think you've done some things to avoid that as well. So you decide with Lubricated Goat, which
Digging
is,
my own grave.
as you said, ugly music.
Yeah.
For ugly people, no doubt.
And then when everyone was getting signed in the early 90s, and I was around all these people that were getting signed, but I never imagined that my band would be signed to a major
with a
label.
name like Lubricated Goat, I don't think so either. But you did get you got interest
Yeah.
from?
Well, I never got interest from major labels.
No, but Sub Pop.
Yeah, like
That's major to me.
All the big underground labels, but this is all before anybody got signed to major labels. So,
But I mean, who got signed to major labels? Mostly the bands that sucked.
yeah, I know. So I never expected it to happen
All right.
before it happened, and it never did.
That's one thing I want to ask you. Look, I don't know you that well, but we've been hanging out a bit. I'm not jaded at all. And I don't think to some degree you're jaded either, because you continue to do what you do best, which is to create these sexy, deviant rock songs.
Yeah, well, my taste in music has never changed.
Absolutely. And you know what? It will probably, popular opinion may never catch up to us. That's just the fucking way it is. So, Ryan, you have been playing with Stu for how long now?
I guess about 5 years.
What drew you to each other? How did you find each other to come up with the Art Gray Noizz Quintet?
I think we met in the Mars bar about 15 years ago. We were roommates for a bit, and then Stu came and rescued me after the breakup of my last band, Woman.
Woman was, and by the way, I saw Woman once, and they were really quite hot. And you did a cover of Anne by the Stooges, which was phenomenal. So Ryan plays a 2-string bass, a very unusual instrument. But by the way, you don't long for those other 2 strings because he really throbs
I caught him
on it.
playing that slappy shit once, and I got some wire cutters and I cut the other string.
What?
Terrible.
Is that
So
true?
that's enough of that shit.
That's bullshit.
I can't handle that.
All right, so Ryan, I want you to step in for a minute because you've been working with this man for 5 years.
I love this man.
You two have been on the scene for quite a while. Thing is, everybody knows and loves you. Why are the Art Gray Noizz? Well, I'll tell you why they're not bigger than what they are. Because rock music, for some reason, to most people, doesn't fucking matter at this point. But it matters to us. It's not going away. What's it like playing with this guy?
Oh, it's just great, endlessly hilarious, you know.
Tell me what the lineup of the Art Gray Noizz is, because I find it very unusual that there's 2 horn players, 1 female horn player, which I love. You play the 2-string bass, 2 guitars, drums. It's a pretty kind of big band sound.
Yeah, I want like a big, nasty sounding rock big band kind of thing without doing jazz rock or without being Blood, Sweat, and Tears or fucking Chicago or something.
Well, God, you have no fear of becoming that. This is the Lydia Spin with Lydia Lunch and the Art Gray Noizz Quintet. We're talking to Stu now about his trajectory of music from Adelaide to Sydney, Melbourne, all around Australia. And then you decided, like everybody does, eventually you have to get out of there.
Yeah, well, I mean, earlier on, before I even had a band, I told my parents my whole life that I was going to have a band. I was going to move to England.
You knew from a very early age, as we all did.
And the first thing I did when I got a job after I left school was saved up money to buy a ticket to England.
What was your job?
I was working like stocking shelves at a supermarket and stuff like that.
Whatever it took.
And then they never paid any attention.
Right.
And then I said, I've got a ticket to London. I was 17. I didn't even have a passport or anything, but they didn't pay any attention to anything I said. And my dad goes, I'm not having a punk turning up on my mother's doorstep.
Well, I'm not having a punk turn up on my mother's doorstep. What, your grandmother?
Yeah.
No, you're not, because I'm going to London, asshole.
His mother's, yeah. So
Yeah, like Granny would have cared. I doubt it.
I never, I never said I'm going over and staying with my grandmother.
Right. Oh, was Granny in London?
Yeah.
Oh, well, then what did he care?
But anyway, they finally discovered that I did have a ticket and I was leaving in a couple of weeks. So they cancelled my ticket.
Cunts again.
And I lost half the money.
You must have been so pissed off.
Yeah, I was. And then I became...
I'm surprised they're still alive. I'm surprised they lived through that.
So then I used to like go out smashing stuff, and I got arrested for willful damage of property a few times. I got arrested for being naked on mushrooms and smashing up
Then they
stores.
wanted you to get the hell out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. All right, go.
So then I didn't have the money to go for another few years, and I got...
You don't make a lot stocking shelves.
No,
You should have been doing like me, giving hand jobs under the table. You could have got there a lot faster. I'm just saying.
I didn't stock shelves for very long.
Well, I didn't do hand jobs under the table for very long. But however, I made a lot more money than stocking shelves. I'm just saying. All right, go ahead. Cut to the chase here. So you get to London.
Years later, I mean, I wanted to go in the late 70s when all this cool
Sure.
shit was happening. And by the time I had the money again, it was like 1985.
Wow.
I got enough money for a ticket from one show in the Beast of Bourbon.
Great. And Beast of Bourbon are actually one of the best bands from Australia. Tex Perkins, Black Milk, one of my favorite albums.
Yeah.
Dirty, raunchy blues rock. And actually, very inspirational for Nick Cave, actually.
Well, I mean, the thing in Australia, everybody used to get called a Nick Cave impersonator.
But I think Nick Cave was a Tex Perkins impersonator.
Well, he hadn't heard him when we first started.
I don't mean the birthday
But
party.
technically,
afterwards.
Tex is a much better singer and it has a better
So
voice.
is Mark Lanigan, but we won't go into
But
that.
Nick
anyway.
Cave looks good in a suit.
He did. Used to anyway. So you arrive in London. What happens? You get your ticket finally. It's 85.
Well, we had
Who's we?
this band that I had in Australia called Salamander Jim with Tex Perkins.
Another terrible name, Salamander Jim, but with Tex Perkins.
Yeah, but we had an album that was finished. Then Tex got asked to come over to London and be in this band with members of the Gun Club.
That must have been a real success. Not.
And
So Tex leaves Australia to join the Gun Club, and you...
So that our band, that killed our band. And then he got over there, so I thought, well, fuck
To
it.
the
I'll go
disaster
over
that
there.
was Jeffrey
I
Lee
got there
Pierce.
before him.
By the way, Jeffrey Lee Pierce, Gun Club, and yes, Kid Congo, who was also in the Gun Club, who we've had on the podcast recently. Jeffrey Lee Pierce was a disaster of a human being, unfortunately. He really kind of willed himself to death, in a sense. And it's too bad. I mean, of course, any dead white man in retrospect is always revered. And I'll say that as my connection with Cypress Grove, who began doing tributes to Jeffrey Lee Pierce, 4 albums actually, after he found unreleased material, and then cajoled a lot of people, myself, Nick Cave, Mark Lanigan, Debbie Harry, even Iggy Pop, into recording songs of Jeffrey Lee Pierce. But as a human being, and as a minimal songwriter, in death, there's often glory. As a human being, he was actually a drunken, fucked up, sadistic piece of shit at the end of his life. I'm just saying.
Right, well, I never really spoke to
Good
him.
thing for you.
The Gun Club was in Australia for quite a while doing these pickup gigs because they got
Well, who
ripped
was the
off.
Gun Club at that time, though?
Kid Congo, Patricia Morrison, and Jeffrey Lee Pierce.
Patricia Morrison, who went on to play in The Damned and Sisters of
Yeah.
Mercy.
Plus a couple of
Who
guys.
was in the Bags
A couple
originally
of
in
guys
LA.
from the Beast. Well, a guy from the Beast of Bourbon called Spencer.
Spencer
And-
Drake.
Spencer Jones.
Spencer Jones. He
And
played
this-
with Shotgun Wedding, Roland Howard and I, when we were in
So
Australia.
they were. There was Spencer and the drummer from Spencer's band,
well,
the Johnnies.
that must have been a pretty good band then.
Yeah, we saw him playing a number of times at this small venue, and this one friend of mine used to go, "Piercy, you fat cunt."
That would be Jeffrey Lee Pierce, you fat cunt.
Yeah, and
But what
Jeffrey Lee Pierce had run across the stage, and I said, "We don't mean it, Jeffrey." And he goes, "You do, you bastards. You do it all the time."
And Jeffrey Lee Pierce, who was the head of the Debbie Harry fan club, anyway, just to say. So anyway, cut to the chase.
Well, in a weird way, he modeled himself on her. He had the
Well,
same
he
hair.
was not a success. Anyway, you go to London, and Tex goes to London.
Yeah. And then Tex went and they said, "We've written these songs," and he went down there.
Down to London town.
He went down to practice with them.
They were awful.
Yeah, and he said, "I don't like these songs," and then one day he just came over to my shitty bedsit and fucking hung out there for the weekend, and then went back to Australia on the Monday.
Look, Miami was a great album by the Gun Club. The Gun Club did have some great albums and great songs. So Tex went back and probably Beast of Bourbon followed, but you're in London now.
Yeah.
So what happens? Now you don't have your singer.
Well, the ironic thing is, I was hanging out at the Bat Cave of all places.
Who wasn't?
I mean, the Bat Cave.
What year
was-
is this now?
This is 85.
All right.
Basically, there was this one club, and it was different places, different nights of the week. One night
Right,
it was the
yeah,
Bat Cave, another night it
absolutely,
was
yeah.
Alice in Wonderland.
Which a lot of clubs in New York at the same time did
was
that.
called
every,
Gossips.
every night was a different theme. Yeah.
Yeah, but one night I was there and I bumped into the guy that used to drum in A Singing Dog from Melbourne.
That classic band
Yeah.
with the worst
He's
name
a fantastic
ever.
drummer, though. And it's like, oh, so we started playing together.
Well, most Australian musicians are pretty damn good because when you live down there or anywhere, even like Gothenburg had great bands, like Sweden had some really great bands like Union Carbide. When you live in a place that's so far away, but yet there was a really good scene down there, you do have the time to become a really good musician,
Yeah. So I was living in this bedsit building that I
which
told you
again
about.
is a one-room prison cell.
And James Johnson lived upstairs.
Oh, big sexy noise gal and drunk Nick Cave,
and his brother
etc.
Ian lived
PJ
2 doors
Harvey.
down. Well, I was jamming with like James Johnson and this guy Michael that was playing
Which,
with him.
by the way, not only did you jam with James Johnston, you shared a lover eventually. I don't know if you shared her, but you both had a relationship with Kat of Bathing
yeah, she told
Toilet.
me about that.
Well, I'd
All roads lead to James Johnson, right?
Do they? Not really, but I have a great rock and roll story. My second favorite story about rock and roll has to do with James Johnson. Since we mentioned your cock in a cistern of fecal matter, I have to tell this story. Let me interject. James Johnson, big sexy noise gal and drunk PJ Harvey, etc. He's in a bar in Soho, that would be London, Old Man's Bar, with Derek Raymond, the crime writer, whose best book was called I Was Doris Sorwes, which Gellin Drunk illustrated. And somebody gave James Johnston a line of, whatever he thought it wasn't. And suddenly he had to immediately go and relieve himself. And he's drunk and high, and he goes into the bathroom, and with his pants down around his knees, falls into between the toilet and the wall, and shits himself all over the place. Derek
Knowing
Raymond...
him, he probably did it with a bit of style, though.
Probably did. Derek Raymond walks in, top crime writer. I Was Doris Sorwes. He goes, don't worry, mate. Just did that last week. Not the end of the story. James Johnston has to get a cab to Hackney, which is quite away from Soho. And he gets in the cab smelling his shit, and the cab driver goes, mate, oh, you fucking asshole. You better fucking get out of this cab. And James Johnston goes, don't worry, I've got AIDS, which of course he does. Which of course he doesn't. So the taxi driver's just furious. He takes him to Hackney, and James Johnston, not wanting to get busted by his wife for having a shit-stained pair of jeans, decides to put the jeans in this shed. Now, it's winter, and he's got no trousers on, and for some reason, the next day, the shed is actually bricked up. So there is a time capsule.
Why, you wanted to get him back and wash him?
There is a time capsule of James Johnston's shitty jeans bricked up in Hackney somewhere. But don't worry, mate, just did that last week. You and James Johnston, who I came to work with in Big Sexy Noize, Gellin Drunk, another band that was really fantastic and totally underrated, and for some reason, just no matter how hard they tried and how good they were, couldn't really get anywhere. So where does he go? Eventually ends up playing with PJ Harvey for 2 years, making a lot of fucking money, and now he's a painter. So Stu, you make sculptures.
Yeah, I did a good painting of James Johnson. Have you seen it?
I have not.
It's on his Facebook page.
I don't want to buy it, but anyway, just saying, he went on, now he's doing paintings. You do sculptures.
Yeah,
You said your last sculpture was of lead belly.
yeah.
Do you sell those?
I do, yeah.
Well, I think you need to get a job. It's about time now, goddammit. So you're in London in a bedsit, hanging out with James Johnston, but you eventually end up, for some reason, at Cat Milan's door.
No.
Well, do tell.
I went back to
We like
Australia
rock.
after that.
We like rock gossip.
I went back to Australia. I was only in London for just under a year, and half the time was like going, this place fucking sucks.
It did.
Shall I go back to
when was
Australia?
That? It was like 85?
Yeah.
I mean, London really sucked in the 80s. I was there, I guess, from
Well, the best thing that happened was
84.
when different good bands came over from
Yeah.
America, generally. you know.
Well, what bands from America?
I saw Sonic Youth opening for Nick Cave with Bob Burt in it.
Was that good?
At the time, I thought it was
Well,
great.
live Sonic Youth were really amazing at that period, actually,
Yeah.
in spite of what the records revealed. But anyway,
I saw you, and I went to.
You saw me.
I never saw you play over there, but I went to this show of Einstedens and Neubauten at
Right.
Heaven.
So you just saw
I
me.
I saw you and Jim Fetus walk through the crowd,
Well,
and that
that
was a
must have
big
been-
deal to us.
Oh.
Look, it's like, wow, look, it's Lydia and Jim Fetus.
So, all right, let's cut to the chase. You're in London. It sucks. You go back all the way to Australia.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Well, I mean, I wasn't going to fucking stay over there.
No, it did suck. I mean, it was so expensive. It was so atrocious. Nothing worked right.
And I was living in my fucking shithole bedsit.
Right, above
And
James or below James Johnston.
My parents, you got to fucking love them, right? The year after they cancelled my ticket to England, they realised that the kids, because all we heard growing up was how great England was, they basically wanted an England with better weather when they moved to Australia.
Of course.
Then they cancelled my ticket, and then the year after, they bought everybody in the family except me a ticket to England.
What cunts? Again, I fucking
And
hate
then-
your parents like I
and
hate
then
most
they
parents.
fucking send me, like, they bring me back Union Jack socks, Union Jack T-shirt, and all this.
And you're in Australia, they're in England.
And then when
I
I
hope
was,
they're dead.
and
Are
when
they
I was,
dead? Are your
when I
parents
was in
dead?
England,
Are
right?
your parents dead?
No.
Well, they should be.
No, they're lovely, but
Oh, really?
I hated.
I
we
haven't
didn't get
heard of
along
a-
for quite a few
I haven't heard a
years.
fucking good thing about him yet,
But
but
listen to
then
this.
again, I'm listening.
So when I was in England living in my fucking bedsit, my parents come along, visit me in the bedsit.
Oh, they must have been
and
appalled.
at least one of them, I think my mother was crying when she come in.
Good.
And they said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'll move into a place with some guys." And my dad goes, "Grown men don't live together." And then,
Well, they should.
And then, so I thought I fucking got to get out of here. So they said, "Look,
According
we'll give you
to
money
Dad's
to get
order.
back to Australia."
Oh, nice. Finally,
They
they
gave
do
me a
something.
return airfare to Australia, and then they go, "There, now you've all had a trip to England."
You understand why I don't procreate? I don't want to be these kind of fucking people. Parents suck. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Ryan, Skeleton Boy, who's just laughing and drinking a beer in the background, who plays a 2-string bass in the Art Gray Noizz Quintet, and Stu Spasm, my favorite band in New York, other than my own, of course. So, Stu, your very harried and horrifying life. You're now in London in a bed sit. You go back to Australia. Then what the hell? I mean, now you're there, and it's like, what, 86, 87?
Yeah, 86.
What are you going to do? God, you've really had a hard run, huh?
So then, at that time, that's when I formed, first it was called Leather Moustache.
You are really a stickler for awful names. Leather Mustache.
Well, we had lots of terrible names.
Jesus Christ. I mean, I thought the Solar Anus, that's Ron Athey. That's a good name, but
And
Leather
then we started
Mustache.
putting out these compilation albums, and we'd make up a stupid name and then make a band to go with it.
You'd be every band on the compilation
It's like
album.
20 explosive hits, but with,
Oh, that's a good idea.
but the bands were called like
Smiling
the Poofters,
Dog, the Poofters, Leather Mustache.
Purple Vulture shit.
Right,
you know,
toilet paper on my back heel. I mean, whatever. When did you finally actually know exactly the sound you were going to define? Was that in Lubricated Goat, or did that come after? I mean, I think that Art Gray Noizz has a really definitive sound, and it is the sound that we miss in rock music now. Lubricated Goat was a bit more abstract and also vulgar. I mean, what about your nude performance?
Well, the weird thing is, like...
Oh, it was weird.
There was a band that played naked. And,
I do
and
not
it wasn't,
endorse
It wasn't
that.
my band.
Naked men, it's not anything I ever want to see. As
And
a
this
matter of
guy
fact,
goes, "Do you want
how
to play
about-
naked
How
on
about
TV?"
jeans, a belt, and leather boots up to your knees?
Oh,
Maybe
we had boots on. They
Well,
said
thank
they said
God
they
you had
weren't
your
all
boots on.
naked. Some of them had hats. There was like a kind of a nude craze. We used to have these gigs.
There was a nude craze.
We used to have these gigs where
I
if,
missed that one.
if you went to the bar in the nude, you got a free drink. But you couldn't just sit there
That's
naked all
Australia.
night.
What you? Oh, you had to like bring your.
You had to
pants.
like take your clothes off, go to the bar, get a drink, and then put them back on.
You had no problem with that. You like to drink.
And
You must
I
really
didn't
like your
do that.
ass.
I didn't do that. I just kind of pulled my pants down and waddled over to the bar.
That must have been a really attractive sight.
Which
Stu.
they wouldn't have been
I mean,
acceptable
Stu,
for
a
just-
man as sexy as you are, you have done some pretty disgusting and unpalatable things, including waddling to a bar with your pants around your knees looking for a free drink. But nonetheless, it's why I do love you, and it's why I love the Art Gray, because basically the Art Gray Noizz Quintet is the sound of a man waddling to a bar with his pants around his knees looking for a free drink. I couldn't describe it any better if I said it myself, and I just did.
What's that song, Mammy? I'd walk a million miles for one of your smiles. With my pants around my ankle.
You could walk to the end of the room, and I might let you kiss my ass, but I really don't think that's going to be very impressive to anybody right now. However, I just been kissed enough. Trust me, there's no room for your lips. I mean, not that my ass isn't big enough to, escort your head into it, but however, we're talking about you, not me. This is the Lydia and Spin with the Art Gray Noizz Quintet. So, Stu, let's cut to the chase. Finally, you're
It
releasing...
was the best thing on the AMREP video compilation.
So now we're talking about Amphetamine Reptile,
Yeah.
which is a very... Tom Hanselmeyer, who has produced Amphetamine Reptile records, Jesus Lizard Cows, Halo of Flies, etc., etc. How did you hook up with them in Minneapolis?
We were very lucky because they heard our first couple of albums and they liked it and they actually wrote to us.
Of Lubricated Goat.
Yeah. And they
Done
wrote
in
to
Australia.
us. Yeah. And offered to put out our records. They did 2 albums that they put out that had already
Well,
come
let's
out.
hope they're going to put out your next one
And
as
then
well,
they
because
put out
nobody
another
fucking
one
cares at this
afterwards.
point. But Tom Hazelmeyer still cares about this kind of music.
Yeah.
Did you go to Minneapolis then?
Well, we went over there and played there when we were on tour.
Okay, so you put out some albums on Amphetamine Reptile,
Yeah.
and then you come to America, Lubricated Goat.
Yeah.
What year is this?
89.
89. How many dates?
Like
lot?
about 30 or something.
But you can't even do 30 dates in America now. It's impossible. You're lucky if you can get 15. Good luck driving, kids. How was that?
It was great because the tour in Australia was just going to Melbourne, doing 3 shows and back to Sydney.
Yeah. So now you're doing 30 shows in America to cities you probably wanted to see where bands that you
Well,
liked.
the ironic
had.
thing, I wanted to go to like New York, Chicago, LA, or whatever, but we
course.
went straight to Seattle. I didn't know the difference between Washington, D.C. and Washington State.
All right.
And then we went to
He's
Minneapolis.
not as smart as he looks.
Yeah.
What happened to Minneapolis? which is where.
Well, I mean, that was
Amphetamine
where they were
Reptile.
based, so we spent a bit of time there. And
By the
then
way, Tom Hazelmeyer is one of the best graphic designers. He has one of the most heart attack inducing restaurants in this country, Grumpy's. And he's also supported a lot of my projects. I have to say, I have great musical taste. Besides being a Republican, gun-toting, ex-punker, Marine, which, I mean, I do love half of those things anyway, but...
No, it was great. We came over and we met him. And, I mean, our first tour was really poorly organized, and he advised us that it might not be a good idea to come, but we would just...
No, you had to.
Doing
What are you going to... You have to do it, of course.
Yeah. So we did that in 89. And the first show... Like, people from Sub Pop were producing half the shows, and this guy Peter Davis was doing the rest.
Oh, yeah. We won't talk about him, but go ahead.
And so anyway, there ended up being this kind of weird rivalry between these two factions.
Well, if only they would have fought harder with more money.
Yeah, well, the money shit wasn't really happening at that point.
I mean, look.
But Hazelmeyer hooked you up with a great van, fucking posters, and
Look,
everything you
Hazelmeyer
needed was
cared.
everywhere.
As opposed to Sub
It was a
Pop, who did-
well-oiled machine, military
Sub Pop put out a
style.
lot of good records. Okay, enough said. Hazelmeyer really cares.
No, he was great.
Hazelmeyer, Amphetamine
We
Reptile
made the right choice
cares.
going with
He
them.
makes the right choice.
And the fucking
And
tour
it
was
matters,
excellent.
you know, because look, you have to play.
Yeah.
And I mean, to do 30 shows in the States in
And the
89.
first show was opening for the Butthole Surfers.
And
in
there we
Seattle.
go, back to the
It
Butthole
was all
Surfers.
downhill from there. You know?
All right. The 80s were a very fertile time for, you know, alternative music, as we both played. And also, again, the connective tissue that the Lydia and Spin seems to talk about all the time is, again, I've worked with Amphetamine Reptile. I've did a single with Halo of Flies, which is Tom Hazelmeyer's band. He's put on, you know, art exhibitions of mine, and I've been invited to his festivals, and I just love him. After your U.S. tour in 89, did you go back to Australia? When did you actually decide you had to settle in New York?
I went back to Australia after that tour ended.
Oh, my God.
And then, well, we had to bide our time until the next tour.
Okay.
And then we did another one in 1990.
Okay, that's pretty quick.
But during the one on 89, that was when I met Kat.
That would be of Babes in Toyland.
And I said, you know, because we were going, oh, we got to marry American girls to stay in the country.
And so you did?
So I said, well, I'm going to marry her, you know.
I wouldn't blame you. She was hot then.
I never saw her again after I started living here for about a year and a half. And then one night she just walked into a bar and we kind of embraced for a picture, and that was it.
Can I ask you, how was the honeymoon nuptials?
It was very good.
I'm going to ask her next time I see her. You thought it was good. I'm sure it was, because she was gorgeous at the time. And very talented. Babes
She
in
was what they
Toyland.
call in Australia a top sort.
Oh, yeah. Babes in Toyland, absolutely brutal femme rock of the highest order. All right, so now you go back to Australia yet again. What are you, delirious?
Oh, I went back to Australia because I had to bide
you
my
had to.
time till the second tour.
Okay, so when do you decide that you're in New York,
Then,
you're going to stay here?
I went to America on the second tour, but then we went to Europe, and while I was in Europe, in Germany, I got stabbed, and I was in hospital for a month, so you
Why'd
haven't
you
got
get
time
stabbed?
for all
Just
that
on the
shit,
street?
right?
Trying to score dope?
Yeah, well,
Oh,
you know,
yeah, well,
we wanted to be like Iggy and, you know.
Honey, nobody's like Iggy, but that's all right.
Yeah, you know, I've got a song about it, but anyway, so
Hey, look, you have a song called
try to copy
I
the
Don't Wanna Be...
fatherland to be like Iggy and Bowie.
He's got a tracheotomy.
Hey, you got a song called I Don't Want to Be Killed by an Idiot, and
Yeah.
that's actually based on a true story.
Another one called Death Star that's about when I got stabbed in Berlin. After I came out of hospital for a month in Switzerland, I met Cop Shoot Cop. You know, I met up with them when I came back to New York, and Todd had a room at his place in Williamsburg,
Which
and
Todd?
I moved in. Todd Ashley.
Okay.
There's Todd, Nats.
That's
Jim Coleman
Jim
and
Coleman,
Phil
who
Palaio.
is Beth B's husband. Now when Human Impact signed to Sub Pop. So they said you have to come to New York. Yes, you did.
They didn't
So-
say I had to. I said I had
Well,
to.
you had to because you met Cop Shoot Cop. But so you get here when?
That was the end of 1990.
So you've been here since 1990?
Yeah.
Let me just say, how tragic is that? Here sits beside me one of my favorite New York bands, who since 1990, actually since the early 80s, has been making incredible music that's sexy, sleazy, raunchy, rock and roll, the kind that is no longer made anymore. What the fuck? Because there is no way to promote this, which is not a dying art, it's not a dead art, is actually one of the most important forms of art because it should be a universal. The thing is, I think that sex is what divides rock and roll right now. Like, if it's too sexy, if it's too threatening, because people are so fucking soft and pathetic and liking things like Billie Eilish, and I'm sorry, but to me that's weak. Hello, Lana Del Rey. If I hear another fucking wobbly woman spouting soft bullshit, I think I'm gonna puke. We need to come back to the sleazy, hard essence of what the human soul really demands, which is a sexual threat, which is called rock and roll. I'm Lydia Lunch with the Lydian Spin. We've been talking to the Art Gray Noizz Quintet.